But even though there is lack of detail when it comes to describing the environment, there is no lack of detail when it comes to sex scenes. Hi everyone, welcome back. Hope everybody out there is doing well. For today's video, I have something a little different for you guys in the way that this is a romance novel, but not your typical romance novel, but it does follow along the same lines of romance novel, as in these two characters, they develop feelings for each other, but of course there's something that gets in the way that keeps them from getting together. They solve these issues and then they have this happily ever after. Today's book is entitled The Fall Before Love, and I was a little hesitant in doing this video because my 11-year-old son watches my videos, and there's some issues that I want to cover that as I said, I'm kind of hesitant to say, and I got to figure out the correct way to word some of the things that I want to say. But anyways, The Fall Before Love by author Nina Mailer follows two characters, Alexa and Joe. And Alexa and Joe meet each other at this pediatric hospital. Both of them are at this hospital for basically the same reasons. Both of them had past loves that didn't work out, that left them scarred, and they both needed a new change. So they both relocated to the same hospital. However, Alexa's been there for about 5 years and Joe is a recent transplant to this hospital. And because of these issues that they've had in these past relationships, of course, this is the major thing that these two people have to get over, that so this story can progress so that they can finally reach their happily ever after. However, Alexa, although she's been scarred by this past relationship, she's at the point in her life where she's ready to move on. She's ready to meet the love of her life and have this big happily ever after. Unfortunately, although the story doesn't really go into those details, Joe is still in the process of, he's still scarred from this last relationship that he was in with this woman named Molly. Molly demoralized Joe. She wasn't a very nice person. She made him feel less than. There were points in the story where she told him that he smelled bad and she asked him to take a shower before they made love. And he had this issue at work where it's traumatized him and he's having these nightmares, and she asked him to sleep in another room so that she could get sleep instead of comfort him as someone should do in a relationship. And she made him feel like he was ugly and just not someone that you would really want to be in a relationship. But even in these instances, I kind of found some of this to be sort of funny because Joe's this really nice looking guy. He's this guy that now that he's not in a relationship with Molly anymore, that women kind of flock to him. He can just go out to a bar and a woman can just give him the eye, or he can just give a woman an eye and they end up going back to his apartment. And in this, it kind of felt like the story didn't really add up at some of these points, because I'm thinking if he's this guy that's really, this sexy guy to the point where when Alexa first meets him, that's all she can think about. It makes me wonder how this guy can lose his self-esteem to this point. And if he did lose his self-esteem to this point, why would he be so okay with meeting up with women, random women? Because to me, that would make me want to kind of shield myself from some random women making those kind of comments to me. And there's even a point in the story where he mentions that he's unable to accept affection because of how Molly has made him feel about himself. But I question that, in that, yeah, Molly was a relationship. It was an unhealthy relationship. It was an emotional and mental abuse. However, before Molly, you had to have been in another relationship. You grew up in a family where your parents are close to you. So at some point you would think that you would get out of your head and remember those times where life was pretty good for you. But anyways, because of the scars that he has because of Molly, he brings this to this relationship with Alexa, which is not really a relationship, because he and Molly, when they meet, they have like these electrical sparks to the point where they can't be around each other without thinking about the things that they want to do to each other. And eventually they end up having a sexual relationship, something that is new to Alexa. Alexa has never had a one night stand. And of course, she is looking for that happily ever after. So of course, emotions become involved in this situation. However, it's a little unclear as to why Alexa falls in love with Joe. We know why Joe falls in love with Alexa. Alexa is this kind-hearted person who makes friends wherever she goes. The children at the ward are in love with her. Her co-workers are interested in every aspect of her life. And on the other hand, Joe is this butthole. He comes into work and he presents himself to the people at work as this standoffish person who basically, I'm just here to do my job. I don't want any friends. And when he and Alexa have these sexual encounters, afterwards, he's really not so nice to her. He becomes very aloof, and to the point where he wants to make sure that she knows that this does not mean anything more than what it is. He doesn't want anyone sleeping over. You've got to go. Alexa lives about 10 minutes further from his house, and it may be 2 o'clock in the morning, but you got to get out of here. And although I consider this author to be an amazing writer, as in she's one of those writers that is able to build a cadence, that's able to keep you in the story, that's able to keep you there where you want to know more about these characters, to the point where I was 80 pages in and it dawned on me that, hey, I don't have a clear picture as to some of the surroundings, some of the places that Alexa and Joe, the hospital, the bars, their apartments. I had no clear picture. I soon realized that this author is not big on description, at least not when it comes to environments. Now, when it comes to the sex scenes, there is nothing left to the imagination. I mean, to the point where Joe describes his you know what as Big Joe, and that kind of threw me off a little bit, because when a guy describes himself as big, I don't know, let someone else describe you as that. Even though at some point Alexa does, when not wanting to give any detail to her co-workers as to this guy that she's sleeping with, she describes him as Mr. Big, you know what. And excuse me for being kind of vague on some of these details. I'm not sure how much YouTube is going to allow me to say. And also, my 11-year-old watches my videos, so I'm trying to figure out how to relay this video to you guys without having to explain some things to him later on. The only real description that we really even get in this story is when Joe is describing Alexa and Alexa is describing Joe, to the point where Joe describes Alexa features several times throughout the story, as if maybe the author might have forgotten that she did. I mean, he describes her behind, he describes her petite figure, he describes her hair color, he just says several times throughout the story how beautiful she is. And don't get me wrong, I love when somebody takes the time to describe how they feel about me and let me know that they think that I'm beautiful. But I think at some point, if this was happening so much to a point, it kind of loses its value. There's points in the story where the lack of description stands out to the point where you can't ignore it. Like how at one point Alexa goes to Joe's apartment for the second time, and she mentions that, oh, it's just as I remembered it from the last time, but we don't know what it was like the last time because you never described it to us. And there's also a point where Alexa goes to see her ex-boyfriend, where she's got to this point where she's starting to feel a little bit better about herself and starting to put herself first. And she wants to get off her chest to Caleb about some of the things that he's done to her that wasn't right, because in their relationship he dumped her for this model, and she finds out later on that she's pregnant, and she comes and tells him, and he's basically like, maybe you should do something about that, and he lets her know that he's not wanting to be in her life. So when she goes to confront him, she tells him that, I forgive you for leaving me, but I do not forgive you for not accepting your child in your life. And she describes how it was staring to those eyes years ago when she was in love with him, but how now she prefers cobalt blue eyes, which are the color of Joe's eyes. But we don't know what Caleb looks like. I don't even know what color his eyes were in comparison to Joe's. But even though there is lack of detail when it comes to describing the environment, there is no lack of detail when it comes to sex scenes. I mean, I'm not going to say this should be labeled as explicit, but I'm just saying that there is no detail left uncovered when these two guys get together. The sex scenes are hot and heavy, and if that's the kind of thing that you're into, where the rest of the story lacks description but you are getting your needs met when it comes to the sexual scenes, then I'm going to tell you that this book is for you. As I said, the author does a great job in story building. Even without the description, we see these couples as they move through this relationship, as they move through their life, as they grow, as they learn from past mistakes, how they learn that maybe I'm not this bad person that I thought that I was. But again, even though I love this author's writing, I did have some issues. There were some grammar mistakes. There were times when getting to the happily ever after seemed to start to become drawn out. There's one point when Joe goes to the cafeteria set on telling Alexa how he feels. He's had these conversations with his best friend, with his parents, and he's starting to realize that yes, he does have feelings for her, and he needs to let her know this before she leaves, before she decides, hey, I've had enough of this nasty attitude of the way that you've been treating me, this cold and hot relationship that we have. And he gets to the cafeteria and he tells her there's this patient, one of the younger patients has been missing her. So under the guise of telling her that this other patient misses her, he kinds of, we know that it's him. He's telling her his feelings, and she comes back and tells him, yeah, I miss the patient too. But he ends up letting her leave, letting her walk away. However, a few sentences later, he's saying, oh, I need to make sure that I let her know really soon how I feel about her, because she needs to know that she's mine. She's mine forever. But the next time we hear him musing, he's saying that he's not good enough for her, and he needs to let her go and find somebody different. But I can't envision what that would look like. I don't want anybody else touching her. So there's a lot of push and pull towards the end of this story that I felt was unnecessary. However, it is tied up nicely. They do eventually get their happily ever after together. And the author does a great way of tying this whole story up together. There's no rushing. There's no outlandish ending or things that really didn't make sense. I felt that the ending tied up well, and we even get to find out a little bit more of their life later on. So even though I felt like I would have loved some description, I would have loved to gotten to know some of Alexa's friends, a little bit more about Alexa's sisters and her parents, and when she goes home, and a bit more description of her apartment and Joe's apartment, and even the break room at work and some of her co-workers. I would have loved to have that. I think it would have made the story a little bit more endearing to me. But even saying that, I end up giving The Fall Before Love 3 stars, meaning that I did like the story. So for any of you guys who are looking for your next steamy romance, then I suggest you pick up a copy. And that ends today's video. Thank you guys again for sticking around with me. Stay safe and try and do something nice for a stranger so we can all do our part to make this world a little better.